One of the hottest topics right now that I have conversations about in our community and the guys who reach out to me is about education because of my background in education. Right now, we are very concerned as fathers about the educational programming that our kids are receiving. We want our kids to be engaged, self directed, masterful learners. And yet we see a system that's not meeting those needs. Well, today we are having a powerful conversation with Matt Beaudreau. Matt is a revolutionary educator. Matt is the founder of Apogee Strong and co founder of Apogee Education. And together, Matt and I are going to unpack the flaws in traditional schooling and explore innovative approaches to learning that will empower both your children and you, the adults. You're going to learn how to create a home environment that nurtures natural curiosity and fosters self directed learning. We want our kids to be self directed. And you're going to discover the power of making education relevant and engaging for your kids and today's youth. You're going to understand the importance of modeling continuous improvement and learning as a parent, because at the end of the day, kids don't listen, they watch. So, how do we model learning as adults? Tune into this whole conversation because you're going to gain the tools you need to reshape your family's educational journey. Whether you're a parent or simply someone passionate about the future of learning, this conversation will challenge your assumptions and inspire new possibilities in your world and help you become a dad making a difference. This episode of the DMD podcast with Matt Beaudreau starts right now. Matt Beaudreau, welcome to the Dad's Making a Difference podcast, brother. Good to see you.
Good to see you as well. And I will save I'll save the comment that I gave last time, but every time I got the side-by-side video of you and me, it's like, dang it. Okay, all right. I got this great beard, and it is what it is, man. It
It's
is
a
what it
great
is. You're
beard.
handsome devil, though. You are a handsome devil. So no, I'm
That
excited to be here,
that is a great beard. I'm not gonna
man.
lie. Well
Thank you, brother.
manicured. I love it.
I appreciate
And man, I'm excited to dive into a conversation with you today. You're a guy who, over the last year or so of my personal journey, I've plugged into your stuff
it.
because of your unique. It would be unique to the people up here in Canada. Your unique perspective on education,
Mm.
and you have depth of, I think, experiences with what
Mhm.
you've been doing that has helped shape something pretty amazing around the United States. And I'd love to dive into that. But Matt, why don't you give, the listeners, the guys who are listening to this and the wives who listen
Mm.
and pass it on to their husbands, a little
Mm.
bit about you, man. Like what's the last, decade look like for you, um, your family and the changes you've made?
It's a good question, man. I appreciate that. And I'll give the high level and glad to go anywhere you want to go, man. But first and foremost, you mentioned, my family, and you may even hear some of the got roosters crowing in the background. I can see them fighting over there. So you may even get a little bit of that in the audio. But I'm married to a beautiful woman. We've been together 19, almost 19 years, been married almost 16.
Mm,
We got three young heroes that we're raising. So I got two daughters that are 13 and 11. I got a young man who's 8. And as of 2 years ago, we bought a farm in the mountains of North Carolina. So we are tried and true farmers at this point, and running a farm. My wife runs the farm. She lets me know
yeah.
when I got to kill something or lift something or chop something. But we're definitely living the farm life, which is great. But we're two Bay Area city kids. We were born and
Yeah.
raised in California, and so this is a big shift for us from a cultural perspective. So but the family is absolutely amazing, and they are the why behind why we do everything that we do. So I tell people, I'm an educator, but please don't confuse that with somebody that works in schools.
Hmm.
Um, and I say it that way because I believe people think, we hear education and they think school. And I
Right.
very much believe those two ideas are diametrically opposed and often at war with one another.
Hmm.
And so, over this past decade and really the last 2 decades, I've been working in education. I worked at Stanford University for quite a while and started seeing some of the game there. Was a public school teacher and administrator in California. Was a private school teacher and administrator, and left because I wanted to create something that I wanted my kids to go to. I didn't want them going to that conveyor belt, what I call the conveyor belt model.
Yeah.
And I couldn't work in that conveyor belt model in integrity because I didn't believe in it any longer. I believed in the people,
Hmm.
many of the teachers, the administrators, the students, for sure. I just didn't believe in the system.
Yeah.
So that's why I had to go create something, and I wanted my kids to be able to go do that too. And the cool thing was, is I started building schools in California that I wanted my kids to go to, and I was very fortunate enough that that idea took off, and we ended up having multiple campuses in a relatively short amount of time. I was traveling and working with organizations all over the world. So I was traveling and doing 60, 70 keynotes a year, working with, I mean, everybody from Lockheed Martin and Wendy's and American Eagle and Purina and National Security Center and Sandia National Labs. And I
Hmm.
mean, you name it, I'm getting to work with these big organizations. And a lot of the work was, ooh, we're hiring all these kids based on grades and based on their college degree. It's not working.
Hmm.
How do we hire better people? How do we get them to, like, what's going on? Where's the disconnect? And I'm helping reconnect them in the workplace. And that just played into helping us, help the young heroes that I was helping on the campuses I was running too. So, and that doesn't none of that even touches what we're doing really right now, but that's a good background.
Yeah, I love it. Would you mind diving into that idea of a conveyor belt school? Because I think
Sure.
people who heard that might be
Mhm.
thinking, what does Matt mean by that? Where did that definition of this education system come from?
Yeah, I don't mind at all. So if you look at the structure of schooling that we're all relatively familiar with, it's now been around for 100 and 120, 130, 140 plus years, right? It's really this industrial model. It is an industrial model that was made primarily for the Industrial Revolution. It was designed, I always tell people to go back and read John Taylor Gatto. He's much more articulate in terms of the history of the what I call that conveyor belt model that was designed for the Industrial Revolution. He does a great job around it, but it's this factory model where we have kids come to a school. They are on a very specific schedule. They are taught very specifically to obey. A bell rings, they move on to the next quote unquote subject, and they learn the habits very early of there is an authority that is going to tell you what to do and when to do it. You're going to be in your specific job, which is to stay with the people of your same date of manufacture. And we're going to move you from one class to another. And then we're going to go from one year to the next year to the next year.
Yeah.
We're going to pretend that this has something to do with child development. It doesn't. We're going to pretend that life works in subjects. It doesn't. And we're going to pretend that there is a very specific roadmap every single human needs to follow. And if they don't fall in line right away, well, something's wrong. You're quote unquote behind, or maybe
Yeah.
this person's quote unquote ahead. All this terminology that we use in our schools is around the religion and the system of school. It
Hmm.
has nothing to do with creating capable, educated individuals. So you're on this conveyor belt for these 12 years, often then leaving to look for the next 4-year conveyor belt
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
come out. And theoretically, at the end of that, you're educated, you can stop learning, and you're ready to go. Everybody knows that's not the way it actually works, but we all pretend that anyways,
Yeah.
because it is a giant religion for all of us. That's what we're bucking against.
Yeah. Man, okay. So those listening to this have to know some of my context. So I appreciate Matt because he's challenging me right now. Matt, I'm a vice principal of a high school,
Yes,
public high
sir.
school here in Canada. We have about 1,300 students, 117 staff members.
Awesome.
And I've been in education now for 17 years, and I'm at a point in my life where um, I love the kids, man. I love the kids. There's times I come home from work and my wife's like, "How was the day?" I was like, "Don't ask me about the day. Ask about how the kids are doing." Like
Yeah.
I just love seeing youth in this age group, which 14 to 18 years old, how much they change. Throughout my
Mm,
career, I've been able to work with all ages. I spent time in an elementary school. I was assistant principal there and it wasn't my gig. Kids were too young, sticky hands.
sure.
Middle school,
Yeah.
which here in Canada would be grades 6 through 8. So you're
Yeah.
talking kids who are 11 years old until about 13, turning 14. and then spent the last 9 years now at this high school. And
Awesome.
what I've seen that I love is the development of youth. What I don't love is the system in which it's done. And I shared this with you a little bit on our pre-call. Sometimes I get called out for being a little bit of a disruptor.
Yes,
And
sir.
and it's not because I don't believe that the people in the building are trying to do good work. It's
Mm,
because I think, what are we actually preparing kids for? You have a
mm,
quote that I've heard you say that an hour and a half ago, I was on a lunch date with my wife,
mm,
and we're talking about an opportunity that presents itself. The principal of our school has retired and
mm,
announced that last week. And I get peppered with some questions about, hey, have you thought about this? Have you thought about this? So my wife, Kim, and I have been thinking about this for the last week and a half. Like, would this look like? I said, well, Kim, like today I'm talking to Matt. He has a quote that sticks with me and I love it, is that
mm,
all education is self-education. And,
mm,
and all education is self education, because we're not there to deliver curriculum that's government mandated to
mm,
expect these kids to have it figured out. We are there to help kids in their own exploration of learning so that
mm,
they can, you also say self education is the only education, and the only type of accountability is self accountability. And
mm,
so many times where I just see adults just want to fit people into a mold and push them through this system so that they can get this diploma grade and then they can move on to the next thing that's just going to smash them in the face because it doesn't fit. Man,
mm,
for those listening, like my context right now is that
mm.
I want to be a disruptor. I want to do some work to change the system, but I also know that's a big wall to knock down. And I'm fascinated by
It
the path
is.
that you went.
It is, man. That is, I appreciate you so much. And I appreciate what you outlined at the very beginning. And I want to make sure that I really hammer this point home because I think sometimes I don't do a good enough job of doing it. People like you, people like that 117, those staff members, they are good human beings
Good.
almost across the
Yep.
board. Are there bad teachers and bad? Of course, there's bad people in any profession,
Yep.
but are the vast majority truly good humans who are there for the right reasons? You bet they are.
Mhm.
And I'll tell you what, this conveyor belt system, as much as I abhor it, it is not going away. So I do want really good humans in this system because one thing that I also know is true, there's a lot of young people who are growing up in homes where mom and dad aren't necessarily on the right track.
That's
And
right.
so the best human beings they see are those men and women who pour their heart and soul into those youth in
Hmm.
those schools, right? So I love that and I applaud every single one of those people. And I applaud people like you who are still in the system and are working to do what you can to reform. And I do think it's a yes and. I think we need good people in there doing what they can do to reform, although I don't believe much can be reformed on a systemic level.
Yeah.
I think it has to be individual. I think you got to have individuals that are creatively insubordinate and go, okay, here's the yes, we're playing this
Yeah.
game and you got to get this grade. Here's what you need. Let me help you understand this. Let me
Yeah.
pour into this. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, we need that just as much as we need what we're doing, which is to revolutionize. We need some people that are reformers and we
Hmm.
need the revolutionaries. Like that's it, right? Where we go, okay, we're going to create something completely different. I was fine being creatively insubordinate for a while
Hmm.
and getting the hand slap for a while and saying, hey, I'm just giving all of my kids A's so that we can play the game, but I'm going
Mm.
to focus on what they all need
Yeah.
and what they want. And we're going to figure out how to mash those together. I'm okay playing that for a little bit, but at the end of the day, for me, I'm a revolutionary at heart. I can't answer to anybody else. I don't do that well,
Hmm.
especially when I see an avenue to do something that I think is, again, not perfect, but better. So
Yeah.
we're revolutionizing, but I applaud the reformers too.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that. I think about the messaging that I try to use in my conversations with staff.
Yeah.
We have this thing in our school. It's kind of been our motto. I adopted it personally. I have it here in my office, and it's just 3 steps: know your why, aim for growth, take ownership. And you can't take the ownership piece without the first two. And
Mm,
when we're in a staff gathering, and we
mhm,
have been centered our conversation the last several years on growth. And people
mhm.
get tired. Oh, I'm tired of the word growth. I'm not talking about growth mindset. Like Carol Dweck stuff is great, but I'm
Yep.
talking like growth. Like, what does it look like for a youth to come in at 14 years old and grow with our support in our
Mm-hmm.
environment so that when they leave here in the system that they're more or less
Mm-hmm.
stuck in, that they leave here as an 18-year-old who's on an amazing pathway for an incredible adventure to choose their own adventure, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not what we pre-describe for them. And another thing you say that I've used in our staff is that there's conversations that come up. Well, what about our diploma marks? So here we have diploma exams at the end of the year. Unfortunately, teachers are held accountable by these often. I think it's baloney.
Yeah.
So what about diploma marks? What about kids use of cell phones? Why aren't they in class? What? And I said, okay, can we stop for a moment? Because what I feel like is we're having a schooling conversation, not an education conversation. And there's a
Right.
difference. Would you
Mm-hmm.
speak to your philosophy on the difference between schooling and educating?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and it is the question for me.
Mm,
And I want to frame it by letting you know a little something about myself. So I, at 4 years old, I started kindergarten. I remember very clearly. So I was either 4 or 5 because I remember very clearly in my kindergarten year. I remember being placed at a table with a bunch of other students, and we were going to dive into a reading activity. And I remember sitting there looking around the room, and I went, okay.
mm,
Well, and we were given a color. We were the red group. And I remember looking around going, okay, those guys over there need the most help with reading.
right.
Those guys over there are better than them, but they're not as good as us. This is the group that they, interesting. Okay, there's a
Hmm.
game being played here, right? I figured that game out early. By 8 years old, I very clearly remember in third grade going, I know this game of school. I get what teachers want to hear. I get how to get good grades, and I'm not even going to really have to try.
Hmm.
Not that I'm that smart. I just knew how to play school, and I figured it out right there that I was going to be good. So by being good, I got straight A's the rest of my schooling career. I got straight A's, right? I played the school game extraordinarily well. I got done, graduated high school, and went, shoot, I know nothing about myself. I know nothing about what I want to do. I don't know how to, like, I've got a couple part-time jobs, but I don't, what's everybody doing? Everybody's going to college? Cool. I guess I'll go to college, right? So I
Yeah.
do the same thing in college, figured out it's the same dang game. I got my straight A's.
Yeah.
I paid attention to, I worked hard. I had 3 jobs. Got better at school or I got better at girls and sports, which is what I was really there for.
Yep.
But I came out and graduated and went, same question.
Mm,
Who am I? What do I want to do? What am I interested in? I knew very well how to play the game of school, but it hit me in the face, like I think it hits a lot of people in the face, that the game of school does not directly translate to the game of life.
hmm.
They are not the same game. Cam, you played basketball, if I remember correctly.
That's right. Yep.
Okay. You played college basketball, correct?
Yep. I did.
Okay. Okay. Would you have been better prepared for your college basketball career if your entire grade school career you never touched a basketball, all you played was baseball? Would you be a better basketball player because all you played was baseball?
No.
No, it doesn't make any sense. It's a different game.
Hmm.
There's similarities.
Yeah.
Yeah, they each have a ball. Cool. They each have a team. Cool. There's similarities, but it doesn't make any sense. So we are spending all of these years getting kids to be really good at school. And then they transfer into the rest of their life and they're going, now I have to figure this out. Shoot, the Pythagorean theorem isn't doing it for me.
Hmm.
And that's a problem.
Yeah.
That to me should be the most obvious example of what we are doing incorrectly,
Mm,
right? Like, what do you need to actually do well at the game of life? And hey, is it possible to start letting young people experience that early and get them really good at that early? And it's really interesting. Even at one of the campuses that I had, I went back and I took a standardized test. Now I got great grades on. I got straight A's. I
yeah.
got great scores on my SATs and all. Like I did the school stuff really well.
Yeah.
I went back and took a standardized math test 3, 4 years ago, and I scored at a quote unquote sixth grade level. I had gone all the way through calculus in high school.
Yeah.
I had gotten A's on every calculus, statistics, anything you could take in college, and I scored at a sixth grade math level. Ironically, the day before, I had just spoken to an organization that paid me $40,000 for an hour of time to stand on a stage.
Yeah.
I can tell you right now, I know how to run a P&L. I can take a look at a, profit and loss statement. I can tell you right now the the cash flow for our house, for all of our businesses that are doing, 7 and 8
Mhm.
figures in the businesses. The cash flow in our house that leaves one of our businesses goes into my business trust that then flows into a family trust that then goes into a private foundation, and I'm operating in a 1041 tax system. Most people operate in a 1040 tax system. Most people don't know that there's two tax systems. I'm not the smartest man on the planet, but I have a decent grip on how things actually work. And
Yeah.
I scored at a sixth
Sixth
grade.
grade level.
Right. But that's what we're focusing on. And that's what we're focusing our outcomes on. I don't see it connecting the way I think it should.
That's so true. Man, you did better than I did in school. You figured out the game. I don't think I ever did figure out the game. I struggled academically. The only reason I went to school is for the sports, to be honest with you. I wasn't even that into girls in high school. I was like, I'm playing ball, I'm playing,
Same ball.
I
Yep.
love football and baseball and basketball, and
Yeah.
I'm gonna do one of them, and that's what kept me going. And my whole thing was gonna follow my buddies out of high school, and we're gonna go work the rigs, work on oil and gas, and that's what we were gonna do. And then it was getting a call from a coach that, hey, we'll give you a scholarship to come play. I never thought to go to college, university. I'm like, that's a possibility for me. Like, no one in my
Yeah.
family has ever graduated high school. My mom, my dad, my grandparent, like nobody's ever graduated high school. I can do this, and you're going to pay for me to go do this? Like, this is unreal.
That's awesome.
But it was through that I actually, because of the system, and I didn't fit it. And I see it in my son, my 9-year-old son.
Yeah.
He just doesn't fit this cookie cutter mold of what we expect of kids. And because I didn't learn how to be a learner to
Yeah.
self educate until I did my master's degree in my 30s.
Yeah.
Like, it, what I see, it just gives me the shakes. I see my son struggle because he's trying to learn his multiplication tables, and he's
Yeah.
sitting at the table and he's putting his hand like this. And yesterday we're doing some work around the house. I told you, kid can read a tape measure.
Yeah.
Bray, 9 years old. Bray, take that piece of wood. I want you to take it. I want you to mark it at 30 and 1/4, and then I want you to take it over to the saw and give it a rip. 9 years old. Like, what do we actually need to learn?
Isn't
So
that isn't that so here? So what do we actually need to learn? So I want to touch on a couple of things right here. So that question in of itself, I remember Seth Godin asking me that question. What should
mm,
education be for? I went, oof, what should it be for? Right? What do we need to learn? And so that begs the question, are there things that all humans need to learn? We can make a case that there are, although there's probably few. And are those things that are going to need to be learned for all time? That's another interesting layer of that question, right? Because I'll ask, so you as today's Friday, April 5th, 2024, at the time of us, having this conversation. If I asked you, Cam, what's the most in-demand skill and job April 5th, 2035?
couldn't tell you.
Yeah, you have no idea. Neither
Right?
do I. We
No,
have no clue what the world is going to be. We don't know.
no.
So the thought that it's like, oh, well, then we better make sure we have your 9-year-olds do multiplication tables so that they're ready for it. Well, that doesn't connect. It doesn't make sense.
Right.
What skills are going to still be needed at that point? Well, I'll go ahead and argue we're going to need to be able to communicate. What does communicate mean? Definition of terms. We need to be able to communicate orally. We need to be able to communicate in what way? Or do we want to be persuasive? Do we want to be articulate? Do we want to be able to have civil discourse? Let's define those things that are always going to matter. Our
Hmm.
physiology is always going to matter. I need to understand my body. Okay, cool. Meta skill. That's always going to matter. Everything else, once we get out of these few meta skills, it starts to become wildly personal, becomes wildly situational. I grew up in the city. I grew up in the Bay Area. I grew up in various, we don't have we had small concrete and we didn't have yards. And then we got,
A
my wife
farm.
and I decided to move to, yeah, dude, not at all a farm, right? So we had all these things. Eventually we got, this is our ninth house together. So we kind of moved to different neighborhoods. We get more and more of a yard. We eventually got 3 acres in California, which was unheard of. And we're like, oh my gosh, what do we do to take care of all this? Now we're on a farm.
Mm.
Okay. 2 years ago, we moved here. I didn't know anything about being a lumberjack and chopping trees. I didn't know anything about goats. I didn't know
Yep.
anything about processing rabbits to sell to a restaurant. I didn't know anything about electric fencing, never mind electric fencing around 20 acres and multiple wells. I knew none of it.
Yeah.
I knew none of it, but I had to learn it now. Now, let
Yep.
me ask you, Cam, do you know how to do any of that?
I
Maybe
do.
some.
Yeah.
Good. Awesome. That's
Yeah.
awesome. So
Yeah.
why do you know how to do it? Because it's been something that's
Small
in your
town.
background? Cool. There
Yeah.
you go.
Background.
If I was to ask my sister, do you know how to do it? She doesn't. Why? Well, it doesn't pertain to her. She doesn't
Mhm.
have that. So education inherently becomes wildly personal based on who we are, how our life plays out, who we're connected with. So the thought again that everybody needs to know the exact same things at the exact same time, and then you're done is provably ridiculous and silly. And I
Yeah.
would argue one of the things you said earlier, that you didn't learn how to be a learner until you were back in your master's degree, right? And you're in your
Hmm.
30s.
Hmm.
I would argue that we're born as learners. We're
Hmm.
born understanding growth and education are the same thing. It's actually what I call a factory setting. Like that is, we are there. School, I believe, is a big part of the process of training that out of us. So what
Unprogrammed.
I would
Yep.
argue you did is you went to your master's program and you just got it back. You just got your curiosity back.
Yeah.
Right? You just got your self-awareness back. You just got that where you're like, okay, I'm going to go ahead and drive the ship. You took ownership and education started to become self-education for you.
Hmm.
Then you were okay. And I would argue that your parents, regardless of the fact that they didn't finish high school, so they must have gone to prison, right? Did they go to prison? Because
They
that's
didn't
what you're
go to
told,
prison.
right?
No.
Oh, shoot. Because everybody makes it out like if you don't graduate high school, you automatically go to jail for the rest of your life, right?
Right. You're a failure. Right.
You're a failure, but it sounds like they've figured it out and made things work. I would argue they're probably pretty dang intelligent,
Yes.
uh, because they've been competent at the game of life. So all of these things I think are great examples of exactly what we're talking about, man.
Hmm. I love that you bring up family. You
Yes,
just
sir.
remind me of my parents and my dad, who is 20 years older than me. So dad's gonna be 65
Okay.
this year. Yeah,
Yeah.
65 this year. My
Awesome.
mom passed away in 2015, but my mom was just under 19 years older than me. They had me obviously quite young.
Yes, sir.
And I think about how different they were. I think about how my dad still at 64 is working in construction like a madman, not because he has to, it's because he loves doing things with his hands and helping other people. And I learned the importance of hard work. The
Mm,
fact that yesterday I was like, oh, I felt like I had a productive day. And my wife's like, yeah, that was quite the very day. And my son kind of tagged along for most of it. I spent 2 hours first thing in the morning, 5 a.m. to 7, doing deep work on my online business. Came home, had
mm,
breakfast with the family, started to do some demo around the house. Took my son, we measured up some project that we needed to do for someone else that we're helping with. Came back, I laid flooring and put up doors and all that stuff. And then at the end of the day, I take my kids to work out and go swim. And like, it was just
mm.
like this fantastic day and had to bring them along. And I was like, how do you figure out how to do all these things? I'm like, my dad taught me. And she's
It's
like,
awesome.
how do you turn it off and be there for the kids? And I'm like, my mom taught me because my mom was always
Beautiful.
super hardworking, but my
Mm,
mom was she was like the empathetic, caring with the fiery side that you were like, whoa, mom, like lost it. Um, I got a little bit of blend of both. And I think when I discovered, I appreciate you saying this and challenging me on this, Matt. When I discovered again how to be a learner, when
mm,
I when I started to like resort back to that original programming,
mm.
it was my mom who encouraged me. She's like, I think you should do this. I think you should do this. Like you have a lot of really good ideas. And I think the people around you don't.
That's good for it to go, mom. Leave it to
Yeah.
mom. Throw it
Yeah.
out there like that. That's awesome, man. Oh, so grateful, man. So grateful. So thankful for good parents like that, right? Because what they're setting is this, they're setting the bar for what's normal and what's going to be a normal mindset in your life. Everything we're
Mhm.
talking about really is even including the mindset and including, this concept of growth, the concept of self-education. All of these things are skills. They're all things that we can acquire, even the mindset. It's a skill acquisition thing.
Yeah.
But what I found is it's really, there are certain skills that we are born with, that desire to grow, that curiosity, that the ability to ideate, and whether it's good or bad doesn't matter. That, like, that is a natural setting for us.
Mhm.
And so shout out to the parents who understand that they are the ones that start as the primary educators. They are the ones that start creating that bar for normal. I always ask, like I'll ask it, and I'm pretty sure I know the answer to this, but so do your children, Cam, do they speak Chinese?
No, they speak English and Spanish.
Okay, they speak English and Spanish. So why do they speak those two languages?
English because we speak English in the house.
Okay,
Spanish because they're in a bilingual program, and I don't learn it. I don't speak Spanish. I don't know what they
got
say.
it.
But yeah,
Okay,
but the two because they're
those two.
around people who speak it.
Bingo. So they're around you at home speaking this. They're around people that you have put them around this program that influences that. They don't speak Chinese, not because you hate Chinese people, not because you hate, but because they're just not in an environment that happens, right?
Right.
Hey, that is the reality for everything. So
Mm.
what are you making normal in your home? That is going to be that's going to be their baseline setting. What is normal for them? Is it normal for them to go work out with dad? Is it normal for them to learn with dad how to put some floor down? Is it normal, or is it normal that dad's on his phone scrolling and then they sit and play video games and they just like, is that normal, right?
Right.
Who are you letting them be around? Where are you letting, like, what are the habits? What are the environments you are placing them in? Because again, for them, that is going to be normal. So that's everything we do from an educational perspective. Everything, the way I look at my family, the way I look at the business is, what are you creating as your baseline for normal? Who's normal to hang around? Who's normal to talk? My 9-year-old, or she's 11 now. When she was 9, she came up to me. I remember this very clearly. She comes up to me and she goes, Dad, okay, I'm thinking about something. If the Federal Reserve can just print money anytime they want to, why are they so bent on taxing everybody all the time for everything? And I went, I love that question. Let's talk about this.
Yeah.
And I was proud of her. And I posted something online, and somebody's like, there's no way that ever happened. A 9-year-old doesn't talk like that. Mine does, because it's a
Hmm.
normal conversation in our house,
Yeah.
right? What are you making normal?
Hmm.
So important. And it sounds like your parents, and obviously based on the man that I know you are too, they did a lot of great things as far as making a lot of great things normal. So shout out to mom and dad,
Yeah.
and rest mama's soul.
Yeah. You talk about the environment, and I think so often people will put it on the kid. The kid isn't able to do this. The 9-year-old would never ask that question. They would never think that way. They don't have the ability to do it. And yet the environment around them is what is
Mm,
going to show how they grow. It's going to nurture them.
sure.
It's not what they are able or not able to do. Like there's a
Mm,
big difference between being capable and being able.
uh-huh.
I think all kids are capable, but I
Agreed.
think I think their ability depends on the environment in which they are.
Well said.
Yeah.
Well said, brother. That's it. I started using this analogy a couple of years ago once we moved out here, because I'm in a home office and it's a basement down here, and so I see, I told you the roosters, like I can kind of see. I back up to where a lot of our chickens and roosters are. Over here to my left, there's a window that goes out to a big garden area, and so my wife and my kids will get out and they'll plant the garden. And one of the things that we figured out and we have learned since we've been out here is that we put the seeds in the ground, but then it's no longer about the seed. That it's no longer about it. It is prior to that. What does the soil look like? How do we make the soil great? How do we make the ground fertile? We put the seed in there, but it's, how do you get the right amount of water? Not too much,
Mhm.
not too little. What does the sun exposure look like? Not too much, not too little. What other plants do you put next to that plant? Because that helps it grow. Because if you put this plant next to it, it's actually going to strangle it and it's not going to work, right?
Yeah.
Everything we do in gardening is environment. We're creating the environment so that the seed will just do what it is designed to do in the first place.
Yeah.
That's what I believe we're doing with our kids, is they're going to grow and we want them to be the best version of what they're created to be. The environment is what we end up having to curate more than anything else.
Let's talk about that. Let's talk about parents right now
Sure.
creating an environment suitable for learning, real
Mm,
learning.
mm,
There's a lot of people out there who would be intimidated by that. Like, I don't have the skill, I don't have the knowledge, although they came through the same system. I don't have the skill, I don't have the time, I don't want to let my kids down. Whatever their limiting belief in that area is,
yeah.
what are some ways or the challenges that people might face in crafting an environment that nurtures learning?
Yeah, it's a really good question. The biggest thing that we see people face issues with, um, is the fact that, and I heard where you kind of said, under, send them into the same system, right? There's that concept of I grew up in this system that has now left me feeling incapable of educating my own children. Therefore,
Right.
I'm going to put them in the exact same system that I went through that left me feeling incapable, right? And the cycle continues, right? So there's that whole concept. Um, but what happens is, I think parents get the most scared because they're afraid that they need to recreate school at home,
Hmm.
right? That's where they feel incapable. Because I'll take parents back and go, okay, look, so they haven't gone to school yet, so great. Where did you send them so that they learned how to speak English? Where did you send them? Well, we didn't send them anywhere, but they still learned it. How did that well, they were just around me and okay, cool. What about learning to walk? You had to send them somewhere to learn to walk because they're walking really well. No, we didn't send them to, no. What happened was they were curious. They saw other people walking. They tried to start walking. They fell. You cheered them on. You got excited about the
Hmm.
failure. They went, oh, there must be something on the other side of this. And you knew there was. And so then they're walking. Hey, that's a microcosm for literally everything else.
Hmm.
So, what are the things you guys are doing together as a family? That's where it starts. The biggest thing parents need to understand is that their trajectory of growth and curiosity and cultivating learning for themselves is the number one priority. And then you just bring them along. You went to go work out. Cam
Hmm.
goes to work out and he brings his kids with him.
Hmm.
So they start to learn that that's an important part of life and how to do it.
Yeah.
We did not teach any of our kids to read. We read a lot. We read to them. We made reading a priority in our house. We made it fun. My wife and I always have endless numbers of books. My girls taught themselves to read by 4 years old and 5 years old. My young man was 7.
Yeah.
But all of them now are voracious readers,
Excellent.
reading multiple books at a time. Why? Because it was normal in our house, and it is normal in our house that
Yeah.
reading is important and it's fun. That's literally what we do with every single bit of it. So that's where parents, again, that's your
Hmm.
responsibility. Is shift you first.
Yeah. I got a question for you, and this is a
Yes, sir.
selfish question because of many of the youth that I encounter on a daily basis, I love them. They're great, but they come
Yeah.
from some environments that aren't those types of environments.
Yes, sir.
And I think there's times as men that we're called to lead and we're called to connect with people in a way that maybe is against the norm a little bit, can be controversial, or there's lots out there. There's lots of dialogue out there about what masculinity means to connect with people and be leaders. And when I'm in conversations with these kids and helping them navigate through problems, mostly by asking questions, not by giving them solutions,
Mhm.
and seeking understanding of where they're at, a lot of it comes down to the environment around them
Yes,
is
sir.
not that nurturing garden environment. And so here's the seed, might be drying out a little bit, doesn't
Yep.
have the tending that it needs.
Yeah.
How do we, as community members, as men, as
Mm.
leaders, as educators,
Mm.
start to craft a community in which we can invite other people into, other kids into,
Mm.
that's natural and supportive in the same way?
I love that question, man. And I do believe that is the question. That is the question for all educators. That is the question for anybody working in a schooling environment. Because if we really want to lead, I very much believe good leaders make leaders out of everybody else, right?
Mhm.
And what is that best educare? One of the root words of education means to draw out to. So when we're talking about all education being self-education, I want to draw out the best version of Cam.
Mhm.
I want to draw out the best version of Kim if I'm working with her, right? And by the way, I love that it's Cam and Kim. That's freaking fantastic. I didn't know that until this, so this is awesome. Um, and I'm sure you've heard it a million times, but it's still
Yeah.
like that's the first time for me, and I think that's great. But as a leader, I want to lead others to become the best version of themselves,
Mhm.
right? So I want that individual component. So that is, I believe, the ultimate question we should all be asking. Um, we had a guest mentor on a couple of weeks ago, and he said something that was so simple, but to me was so profound. And I believe it speaks to the heart of what we're talking about here. He has a gym that he invites young people. He has a gym that makes money in a number of different ways, but for young people, it's always free. And somebody on the call asked him, "Well, how do you get these teenagers that are coming in and, they're said they're dealing with anxiety and they say that, they're struggling and they say like, how do you get them to put the phone down, man, and start doing all this? Like, what do you do? How do you coax them? How do you bribe them? How do you?" He goes, "That's not my job." He goes, "My job is to be more interesting than that phone they brought in with them."
Mm,
So, as leaders in an educational environment, part of our job, I truly believe this is different than entertain them.
right.
Our job is to be more interesting and create an environment that's more interesting than the problems they have going on at home. Now, that's easier said than done. I understand that. But imagine if you have a group of adults who love the kids that much and really created this environment where they come in and instead of feeling that they're coming to school, it's like, no, now you're entering an escape room and this is what we've got to do and this is what we've got to figure out. Like, how do you create a more interesting environment where the problems, I can put it to the side for now. The phone, I don't need it right. I don't need the freaking TikTok right now.
Yeah.
I'm interested. I'm all in. Part of that's relationship, but part of that is what are we doing together too? So I think that's the mindset,
Hmm.
right? And then that's where we'd have to start getting down to the individuals like, okay, well, where are we talking now? Are you talking where you are in Canada? Are you talking some of the gang members that I worked with in Stockton?
Yeah.
Who come from this specific background. I got friends who are teachers in Oakland. Like, how do we make that an interesting thing? It's a hard sell, but that's where our focus needs to be.
Yeah. It's amazing the amount of pushback when you say to somebody, you need to be more not entertaining but engaging than the device they have in front of them. Well, I
Yes,
am. I have to deliver these out. What? What? No one's
I know.
coming, the outcome police aren't coming by your classroom in the school and saying, "Did you check off all of these?" What they're
Right.
looking like, we want kids to learn. And so what does engagement look like? Oh, I don't know how to do that. Man, you have an awesome side gig in which you do the A, B, C. Like,
Yeah.
bring that into your teaching. You
Yeah.
have a teacher who's fantastic in digital design, but she's not teaching digital design. Like, bring all your digital design stuff into here.
Let's
Kids,
go. Yeah.
like I started a little entrepreneurship group for kids at school just to see if there was anything. So we got kids setting up drop shipping. They got Amazon stuff. Teachers like, what's going on? I said, because this is what it's about. Like, these kids
Yes,
are
sir.
finding something that they're engaged in. We got kids doing, when I first started my online business, Fight That Ad Bod, all my video editing was done by a 16-year-old kid in our digital media class. And I paid
That's,
him. And I was
that's right.
like, there's kids who already know their passion. So when they come into your space and they got their phone in front of you, it's not because they're being disrespectful to you. It's that they don't find that learning environment valuable for where the path that they're on. So let's make it valuable and let's engage them in the process. Now
That's
there's,
exactly right.
yeah,
And people push back like that's a crazy thought. But I'd like the adults to put themselves in that environment. If
right.
you were to go to a conference, right, and maybe it's a PD, maybe it's a professional, work day.
Professional learning, whatever it is. Yeah.
Yeah, it's professional day, and the principal says, "Hey, we're all going to this conference right here," and you get there, and it is the most dry, boring, does not apply to you and your job, your interests at all.
Never
You
happens.
think you're not going to be like, "Oh my God, what is going on Instagram right
Yeah.
now?" I'm
Right.
gonna, of course you are.
Yeah.
So then but for some reason, a 16-year-old or a 12-year-old or a 7-year-old, they're not supposed to have that. You're supposed to, it, they're
Yeah.
not, they're not practicing to be people. They're people with less practice. That's it. They're still
I
human
like
beings.
that. Yeah.
They're still human beings. So it applies to you. It kind of applies to them too. We need to give them that, I think there ends up being a respect factor, but I understand people who are teachers believing, but my job relies on me doing this like I've always known how to do it. And that's where it gets hard.
Yeah, it gets hard. You talked about leadership and you talked about developing leaders that can create healthy communities, healthy environments. I know
Mhm.
you're passionate about leadership. You have a lot on the go. Would you talk and speak to Apogee Strong, your education programs, Apogee Man, Apogee Woman? You have all of this. What was the pivotal movement for you to make this change to
Mhm.
create these programs. And tell us a little bit about those programs you have in place.
Yeah. Thank you, brother. So, um, even in developing the schools that we developed, there were still these inherent biases towards academia, and still trying to help parents understand, look, academia is fine and there's an important piece there, but there is so much more.
Mm-hmm.
And we're trying to implement some of these ideas into the conveyor belt schools. We're getting a lot of pushback, and so we're going, man, okay, how do I create other opportunities that I can give to my young people on these campuses, but maybe I can even offer it to some people at other campuses too. Like where can I maybe bridge the gap and make this like almost like after school program or something? So
Mm-hmm.
I got together with my partner on this, Tim Kennedy, and some of the listeners may know who Tim is.
Mm-hmm.
We just went, man, I'll tell you what, we have so many good men in our network between the two of us, right? We are connected. We have a lot of mutual friends, but we just both have these great men. What if we put together this roadmap that we think is a real educational experience? And the design of it is over the course of 12 months, there's some readings, there's workouts, but there's specific projects and challenges that are designed for a young person to take on, a young man can take on and go, okay, I'm going to take all of it on. I'm going to create a digital portfolio of my leadership journey. So I have something tangible that I'm working on and creating that I can then go show the world too. Like, hey, look, I am capable
Mm-hmm.
and I've made myself able in this process. Like, here you go. But what it also does is it highlights over the course of these 12 months. Here's where I'm really excited and I crush it. Here's where I'm not super excited, but I still crush it. Here's where I'm really excited about this, but I don't know a lot. And so I struggled on this one. And here's where I'm not really excited and I did not do well.
Yeah.
It's a spotlight over all these different areas, right? And so then you can have self-confidence because you've done some hard things, and you have self-awareness because you've tried a bunch of things. And so then you can take the next step after those 12 months. What does that look like? If they pour in for those 12 months, we work with them for free forever.
Mm.
No matter what, we
Wow.
work with them on whatever's next. And so then they're also talking every single week to a high level individual, and they're, when I say high level individual, I could name drop a ton of people that everybody would know that are coming in as these guest mentors. So they've got this outline. So at the end of those 12 months, they go, okay, I have a pretty good idea of what I want to do, who I am, what I'm good at, what I'm not. And I at least have some direction moving forward on where I want to get better. We developed that. It's been wildly successful to the tune of, young men not just getting full ride scholarships into colleges, but, other postgraduate programs. We have some universities that are like, hey, if you guys sign off on any of these young men, automatic acceptance into our university,
Wow.
scholarships off the top, by the way,
Mm-hmm.
like we're ready to go. And we also have young men that I had a young man who's 18 and just got offered, a six-figure job offer. Then they're going to move him across the country to go work for these organizations because of the way he shows up in his digital portfolio.
Yeah.
So success in any way that you can define it, more importantly, it's success in how the young man defines it.
Mm-hmm.
And that naturally gave way to, a lot of the dads went, hey, what if we did something like this for men that was the same thing? And that naturally turned, and we have about 1,000 men across the globe. We've got a few hundred women. We developed a women's program later. We've got another one coming for young women. And then all of these come together on our campuses, the K through 12 campuses that we're launching. So that's what it is, though. It's just these educational experiences to figure out who you are and who you want to be.
Yeah. Amazing. I love it,
It's the
man.
best,
I love it. Hey, I
the
got a
best.
question. I got a question for you.
Yes, sir.
As a dad right now, what's
Yes,
one
sir.
area of growth that you're excited about diving into right now?
For myself personally,
You personally, as a dad.
yeah, the biggest area, I love that question, man. Thank you for that. The biggest area of growth for me is scaling the business and getting better as we scale. So in my previous businesses, I had the individual speaking business, and that was, scaling just looked like I got to charge more as I got, went around. I'm speaking on one stage at a time to one company at a time. Maybe there's a consulting back end, maybe not, but I'm on the road and I can just start to increase my fees, right? And that's
Yeah.
great. And it was a lot of fun, and I still love doing that. That's great. But that's how that scaled. The schools scaling it really meant I got to open another campus over here, right? So it's almost like I got this and I'm going to go and I'm going to stamp it over here too. Next, I'm going to stamp it over here. we've got a different model here because we've got all of these verticals that can stand alone,
Mhm.
but then they all come together. And then we've created the nonprofit links right to that. We've created our payment system that folds into our nonprofit, that folds into the scholarship program. So we've got all these verticals that can stand alone and then come together. So now the new challenge for me is scaling all of these things appropriately, but not losing, I can't do it all anymore. So I got to
Yeah.
build the right team. And I don't want to not just not lose steam. I want to get better every time we scale. So we're integrating more coaches of our men's graduates. We're bringing them back in and making them coaches for men and young men. We're going to do the same thing for the women. We're getting live events that we're now leaving templates for the men and women who go through it to be able to perpetuate those themselves and have sovereignty and freedom through their own business there too in a rev share thing. So that's what's interesting for me is scaling the right way. That really, goes into this mission of sovereignty and freedom and makes us better as we go. It's cool. I'm blowing it on a lot of time, but I've got a great team that's like, oh, that was a stupid idea. Here's what we should do
Yeah.
instead. Cool, got it. Sweet, sounds good. But that's my charge right now.
I love it. Hey, it's okay that you blow it sometimes. Growth comes through
Oh
pain and
yeah,
discomfort. Hey?
that's it, brother. That's it.
Yeah.
Failing forward, right? That's it. I am all for it. So no, it's
Yeah.
a good thing.
Matt, if someone's listening to this and they want to learn more about you and your work and your programs, where can they do that?
Thank you, brother. I appreciate you. ApogeeStrong.com is where I'll send anybody. So APOGEE strong.com. You'll be able to see literally everything there. It'll link to all the verticals. It links to our foundation. It links to Apogee Pays. If you're an entrepreneur and you want to help just by doing the business you already do, I mean, it links to all those things. So that's where to go. I'm active at my name on most social platforms, so they can reach out to me there too.
Amazing. Matt, I appreciate you. Thank you for taking time away from your family and your work to spend with us today. And I can't wait to see what you have in store.
Honor is mine, brother. Thank you.